guys pass this around, you can kind of check it out. It's kind of fun to look at. Here's some from Zimbabwe. These are plus ones here. Reserve checks from Zimbabwe, and I'll keep these ones for a little bit. So, what does it need to be? Is it money? Yeah. Was traded or is traded?
Was.
And that makes it money. Madison.
If it's generally accepted as a form of capital.
Okay, generally accepted. So first of all, is what I showed you there from Zimbabwe and Venezuela money in the United States? No. So it's definitely not money in the United States because it's not generally accepted here as a form of payment. And then I'm slightly tricking you. The reason why I have a $50,000 bill from Venezuela is that it is no longer money in Venezuela either. So people are not generally accepting that bill any longer because it's been garbage for a while because of what the government did. Same thing with some Zim dollars from Zimbabwe are in there. That is no longer money in Zimbabwe. So just because it looks like currency or dollar bill doesn't mean that it is. So is it generally accepted? That's the main thing. How about this one? Yeah? Feel that tired. What do you think? Is that money? What do you think? No, why? It's fake. Somebody had a nice little printing press themselves and made this. So this is, I don't even know if it's counterfeit money or not, but I'll tell you the story of it. I was coming home from the bank and looked on the side of the road, and there was this white bank envelope, and there was a whole bunch of these scattered around. And I'm like, holy cats, what is going on? So I went and picked them up. And this is what I found, and I kind of had a quick laugh because at a glance, you know, at a distance, this of course looks like the real deal. It does say on here, somewhere I thought, copy. There it says copy, which is probably a little questionable on its value, but let me pass these around. So far back, we should move up today. I might have a few more things. So that is some money. Honestly, I don't think it's even attempting to be counterfeit, but it looks like money, but it's not, right? So we got to kind of hang our hat. Is this money? This is actual currency from the Federal Reserve. Remember what I told you guys yesterday, what one of the functions of the Federal Reserve is? They take those old money and they cut them up and shred them. And so they give those shredded bags of money out. And of course, that's not money. I can't walk into Walmart and hand them that, even though that's the real paper, the real deal, blah, blah, blah. That's not money. So we got lots of different things that could be used as money, but it's not money. So it has to be generally accepted by people is kind of the main thing. Cigarettes have been money, seashells have been money. Hopefully we'll get our video going. I don't know, Kevin, does it look like we'll be able to do it today or not? It's downloading? Okay, well, we'll see if we can do it. Or I was thinking if you upload it to YouTube, that's what we need to do anyway. I was going to put that on your list of things to do.
Share that link with me.
Yeah, so that's a possibility. All right, so any questions or comments so far?
I know in other countries, like, I know that our dollar is made of paper, but in like Britain and some other countries, they actually have it made of plastic or other things that can be torn, burned, or like ruined.
Yeah, so the more durable it is, usually the better. That's why we've tried to have advancements in dollars. If you can, have you guys run a dollar bill through your washing machine before? I mean, most people have, right? It still goes through that, so they've kind of designed it for that purpose as well. All right, so I do have a different video I'm going to show you. And before I do, though, I want to explain where I want to get it tied up here. There it is. So in the country of Zimbabwe, in the country of Venezuela, the government would run the printing press. And so we're going to learn today, we have kind of a similar thing that goes on. But essentially, if the government needs money, since they, in some countries, have different setups where the fiscal government, the president of the country and the Congress can essentially, oh, we need some more weapons of mass destruction, then let's just go print off money and then go buy it. So now think about what happens here. This is one of the interesting things about how inflation happens. So if, I'm sorry, give me your name again. Carson is the owner of Guns R Us, right? The weapons manufacturer. And so I'm the government and I'm like, Carson, can you get me some weapons? And he's like, sure, but cash only. He's like, fine. So then Carson gets the cash, I get the weapons, but now what does Carson do with it? He's a private person, a business owner in the country. What does Carson do with that $10 bill? That's it?
Go buy other things.
Yeah, go buy other things. So he runs to Walmart, right, and buys some stuff. Walmart pays their people, and now we're back into that kind of money kind of flowing into the system with its starting place being the government. And so when Carson first gets the $10 bill, he's got extra money and he commands maybe a lot of goods and services. He gets the benefit of the government printing money. But the last person to get the $10 bill, inflation might have caught up with it, and now this $10 used to buy 10 $1 hamburgers, but now it only buys 5, right? So the purchasing power of the dollar, of these bills, can eventually, will eventually go down if the government just prints money. It can't print money without consequences, right? That's part of what economics is all about, is that the way value is created is through people exchanging value for value, and that way it builds wealth. But if the government's just adding money to the system, then think of it as an auction. If you guys were the auction and I was the auctioneer, and we're auctioning off this keyboard, and you guys all have a certain amount of money in your wallets right now, right? And so we kind of start to do an auction, and let's say this is a desirable thing, and so, 100, 100, 110, 110. And then all of a sudden, if I go and add a whole bunch of money to your wallets, if I double the amount of money in your wallets, you can start rebidding, right? Now all of a sudden, oh, it's only 120? Well, geez, with this extra money, I can go 140, 160, 180. And so prices are bid up because we haven't made any more keyboards. We actually didn't create any wealth for society. We just created money. And if money's the instrument to buy that stuff, it creates inflation that we've been talking about the whole term. All right, so any questions there? So this cute little kid here is apparently rich. He lives in Zimbabwe. Look at how cute he, look at that big smile. That's some serious, currency, right? Look at that. I mean, there's gotta be, this one says 200,000 on it. $200,000, 200,000 Zim dollars, and he's got a bundle of them. So, what's going on? How can this happen? Here we go.
One of the things that we put together as a little display for some of our clients is a series of 27 official notes. This is currency from the country of Zimbabwe. And if you take a look here, this starts out at $1, and the date on it, I don't know if you can zoom in and see that or not, David, but in 2007, they had ones, and then of course 5s, 10s, and 20s. And this was the currency that was being used. As we well know, what happened, the hyperinflation started to kick in, and they started printing higher and higher denominations as people demanded more and more currency. And so they got up to 500s and the thousands. We're still in 2007. Here in 2008, they started printing in the tens of thousands. So in a period of less than 1 year, we went from ones, fives, tens, all the way up to tens and 20,000s. You start looking up here and 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, and $1 million bills, and it just kept going and going and going. Let me show you over here. We get the billions of 1 and 5 and 10 and 20, and then here's a $50 billion bill. On July 4th of 2008, a can of Coke would have cost you $50 billion for breakfast.
Now, what is the gross domestic product, the income of our nation, roughly? That's the number I'd like you guys to keep off the top of your head. What's the gross domestic product, the dollar value of all final goods and services produced within the nation's boundaries over the course of a year for the United States? Roughly, millions, thousands, billions, trillions, gazillions. What level are we at? Billions?
No, million.
Millions?
Like 1/3.
How do we measure it in general? Are we in the billions, in the trillions, in the gazillions, in the quadrillions? You guys should have this right off the top of your head. We started in week 2, we hit some of the macro stuff. Gross domestic product. What is it? Yep, look back in your notes. I like that,
We have
Nick.
it written down like this.
First person to get the answer gets an extra credit. So shut up and find it. Dig, 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 fast, fast, fast. No Googling, of course. You lose points for that one, Tim. So that's a negative 1 point for Tim. Yeah.
How the fuck?
No, I'm looking for an actual dollar amount. What is the GDP for the United States? The income for our nation. If we add up everybody's income, I gotta admit, I'm slightly crushed that you guys don't have at least one person doesn't have even a close ballpark.
Did we write it down like the number specifically?
Yes, should be somewhere in there. You don't have to give me an exact number either. Just roughly. And I asked even, is it in the millions, the billions, the trillions, and the quadrillions? Simon? In the trillions. Okay, now you don't get your extra credit yet. What in the trillion? Like 1,000 trillion, 2 trillion, 4 trillion, 30 trillion, 60 trillion? Roughly, what kind of trillions are we talking about? 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Take a guess. Which one resonates with you? Madison? 20 is correct. Madison gets the extra credit. 20-something trillion is all I ask of you. Now, everybody together. What is the gross domestic product in the United States roughly? 20 trillion. Thank you. Gosh, that makes me feel so good as a professor. I can't tell you how much. All right, so now this thing is at 50 billion. So what is $1 trillion? How many billions? 1 trillion equals how many billions? 1,000 billion. This can of Coke was 50 billion. Okay, trying to bring this into line with you. This is the same old can of Coca-Cola. Actually, a lot better Coca-Cola because they use real sugar instead of corn syrup. But that's another story. If you travel to other countries, you got to try their sodas. It's much better. So 1,000 billion. So this is where we're at with this country. And so now what happened essentially is because we ran off the printing press initially, right? When we started this thing off, it was early. Then the government goes back to Carson and says, Carson, I need more weapons of mass destruction. And I said, how much are they now? And he says 20,000. 20,000? Wow, what's happened? I don't know, but 20,000. Okay, Carson, 20,000. get your weapons, Carson goes and runs to Walmart, and the chain starts again, right? So we're always originating this inflation by just printing off money without creation of new goods and services. Okay, so the story continues.
But at lunchtime, it would be 100 billion, and by the time you got to dinner, it would be 150 billion dollars. Their inflation rate, as you know, was approximately 10 to the 27th power. Something that's just staggering. And by the time they started printing, they said, well, forget the billions, let's just go to the trillions. So they started printing 10, 20, 15, $100 trillion notes. They hired a German company to print these. And they placed the orders for these, and by the time the German company was finished actually printing them, they weren't worth the paper and the ink that it took to make them. And so the German company never delivered them, they were never circulated. So these are all, uncirculated banknotes, but it illustrates how fast, how quickly, and how devastating hyperinflation can be. 2007 to 2008, in a period of less than 2 years, about 1.5 years, the currency imploded, and now they don't even have a national currency in Zimbabwe. They now use hard currencies, gold and silver.
Quite a lesson, and one I hope you know one.
Okay, so this guy's a gold and
Yeah.
silver guy, which
This
I
is
don't believe in
thank
either,
you so much for
but I
your
like his display of the bills. So
Why?
buy gold. All right, so now with inflation happening, here's something that my major professor from graduate school sent me when this was really going on. This was in 2008, and so it was just a nice little spreadsheet that kind of gives you an idea. And so it was just, here's the date, 07 January, month by month, inflation 13%. I mean, we almost had 10% in the United States, remember, just not too long ago, depending on which measure you were using. But then 77, 207, and now we're back into a year later, and now look at these numbers. This is just doing simple math. You guys remember the formula, right? It's the new price. So inflation is the new minus the old divided by the old, right? That's that calculation, just doing it for Zimbabwe. And he said in the morning it's one price, and so in the evening it's a different price. Now, so that is how the currency basically implodes. And what are people doing then? They're still living their lives. How has life changed for them fundamentally? How are their incentives different when this stuff means nothing and you get your paycheck? Yeah?
But in Germany we had that too. And
Yeah.
We had a loaf of bread for like $50 million, euros, or mark, I think it was at that time. And what people did is they just paid with resources.
Okay, pay with resources, so back to trade, right? So you could do some trading, so you're back to a barter system. So imagine, what's your incentive if you get your paycheck and your boss comes up and says, okay, you did a good job today. By the way, people would start to get paid daily and stuff. Here's your paycheck, and it's 8 a.m. in the morning. What do you do, Caroline, if that's your paycheck and you just got paid in cash and you're living in Zimbabwe?
You bread?
Probably go buy resources.
Go buy in the morning right away, right? I'm gonna take out some time to work to go to the grocery store. You gotta get rid of this hot potato and turn it into a can of soap, a loaf of bread, right? So my toilet paper, my basic necessities, you need to get this out of your hands as quickly as possible into something else. Now, what else could you do with it if you could get your hands on it and you didn't have, you wanted some money to store? So remember yesterday, what are the 3 functions of money from yesterday? 3 functions of money. Give me one of them. I want one from each person. Medium of exchange. So medium of exchange, Nadia? Unit of account. So we're using it to measure stuff. And then store of value. So which one is really missing when this hyperinflation kicks in? Store of value, right? So it's losing, you got to get rid of it as soon as possible. All right, so then if you can get yourself into a hard currency, then that's one way that you could trade it. So the Zim dollar would still have some exchange value with the American dollar. And so if the American dollar is not inflating and other fellow country citizens are willing to take dollars, then we start to get rid of it. I can't eat this much soup and perishable goods. My tomatoes are going to go bad, right? There's only so much food you can buy. So then if you can find an asset that has a store of value, you can do the trade. And now you're holding a $10 bill, and as people start to learn, like, oh, well, I guess I'll take American dollars, then the country starts to adopt a different currency instead of its own. And it's usually market driven when that happens. The government will say, no, that's illegal. Most governments are going to say that's illegal right away, but then they can't stop the underground economy, and people are just going to do it in hiding, and they put it in their mattress and whatever. And then eventually the government has to surrender and say, you know what, I don't care if you exchange money. So when I went to Argentina, it's technically not legal, but the government wasn't enforcing anything, and so there's money changers that are changing the dollar bills into Argentine pesos. And so this all kind of happens through market forces. You as a human being, us as society, wants something to serve as money, right? If we're in the prisoners of war camp, it's cigarettes, right? We're always going to seek something because mutual exchange between parties brings a win-win situation. So it's to both parties' advantage, both the buyers and sellers, to find something that serves as money. Things that are generally accepted as a medium of exchange, right? Something that's generally accepted as a payment for something. Okay, so what else could people buy? When I went to Zimbabwe, I saw a lot of unfinished houses. Same thing in Guatemala. A lot of houses that have, part of the brickwork started. Why do you think I saw a lot of unfinished houses?
The
Yep.
money that the builder planned wasn't enough.
No, that would be an American story, that the builder went bankrupt. This is a very logical thing for if you own a house, and everybody needs a house, right? So food, shelter, clothing type of thing, right? I mentioned food, but what else has a store of value that's pretty nice related to your house? A lot of times they use concrete and brick, not wood and vinyl siding like we do in the United States. Does brick have a good store of value? A brick or a concrete block? Yeah, right? Is the brick and concrete block easy to steal off of your property? Not really. I mean, it's not worth that much, and it's heavy, and you have to truck it away, as opposed to loading up a thing of currency, right? We can take $1 million probably in a stack this big, but you take $1 million worth of bricks, and that's, a stadium probably worth of brickwork. So what do people do for a store of value? They take this money that, again, instead of running to the store and buying bread and soup and stuff, they buy some bricks. I'll take 10 bricks today. Okay, great. Put them in a wheelbarrow, bring them to your property, and maybe you put them in, maybe you wait till you get more bricks, right? And so you have a lot of unfinished homes. Literally, people are building their homes brick by brick when the paycheck comes in, because it's a good store of value. Okay, questions or comments on that?
Earlier you mentioned you don't believe in the gold value or gold standard, and I've heard that term thrown around a lot, but what is it really?
Okay, so now there's two different things, and yesterday we learned what's backing the dollars. What's on the back again? In God we trust, not the government. So there is no gold backing. So you said two different things, Jesse. One is the gold standard, which I actually would believe in more, to have the government forced to have an asset that backs the currency. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. That's a lengthier discussion. But and it's so that they can't abuse us like they did with the COVID bonds and the latest inflation that we have. They can't print the money if it's backed by gold legally. What I don't believe in from the video is buying gold. I don't believe in buying gold as an asset for investing either, because it's so volatile, and if you look at gold prices, it's not even close to what the stock market drives. So there's two different concepts there. Buying and owning gold as an investment versus the country being on a gold standard for the currency. Those are two totally separate things.
Why did we abandon the gold standard then?
Because the government wanted to abuse us. It gives them much more power for them, and I'm not kidding. They might have had good intentions. I'm not saying they were trying to abuse us intentionally. They had good hearts, but fatal conceit, as Hayek said. So they thought they could do more help for society than harm by being more active with controlling money. Turns out they can't. And so that power tends to grow, and there's not enough information for them to make good decisions, in my humble opinion. So, all right, so we're going to leave it at that for now, and we can take some more questions later. But we got to learn a little bit more about our system. So, we've talked about Colombia, Argentina, Zimbabwe. Even World War II, Germany, post-World War II is where Germany experienced hyperinflation because they were trying to print off money to get things started to rebuild Germany after World War II. And so our system in the United States is a little different. Similar to other developed countries, but we kind of paved the way. All right, so this great country of ours was born, so let's see, the history of money in the USA. This is going to be a brief history. I'm not going to go too much, a brief history. But what happened in 1776? What is it? The Declaration of Independence. So 4th of July, right? So we tell the Brits to go to hell, we want to be our own country. And so the United States is born in some ways, right? As a more formal country, eventually the Constitution gets put into place. So I like to start that off because it wasn't until 1913 that the Federal Reserve Bank gets started. So the Federal Reserve Bank is the central bank of the United States. And it starts in 1913, followed by the Federal Reserve Act of 1907 is what Congress put into place. And this gap time in between here, we didn't have a currency. There was a national bank that was tried, but usually we had kind of a system of banks in between here and here. You know, we had some private banks with rich people's money. And again, there's kind of a whole long history. You can take a whole course on this, but I just want you to get the idea that people would, there was still, the idea of the banking system was there, but it wasn't centralized or under the authority of the federal government. When we go back to 1776, Americans were pretty hesitant about centralized power, right? So the idea of putting our money supply in the hands of one group was pretty scary. But we had gone through a number of kind of financial crisis or small recessions with banks failing. So one of the reasons that the Fed formed, so reasons for forming the Fed. So we'll affectionately call it the Fed. One is that banks would tend to fail. So a bank failures would happen, and cause economic slowdown. So it wasn't functioning very well. So how does a bank make money? And let's just be specific, make a profit. If it's a business and you're a rich person in the small town or something, how does a bank make a profit? And you can think about the way banks work today still. This is still kind of just the general, this isn't historically, but this is, you can think of your bank today. What does the bank do to make a profit? Yeah, Tim.
Basically save with your money, but it invests your money and of the interest.
Okay. So say it takes in savers' money, so it takes in deposits. So how does a bank make money? It takes in deposits. And then what does it do after that? Yeah, you said investing, but a little more specific. Charges interest on what?
Like
Loans, right? So it takes in deposits and it makes loans. And the key part here is the spread. The spread is the interest rate between the loans and the deposits. So maybe we make loans at 6%, and we have deposits being paid 3%. That means we have a 3% spread. So pretty basic here. So make loans, take in deposits, and then the key is that the loan rate and the deposit rate have a spread, and the spread is the profit for the banker. Now, another thing that's kind of evolved over time, wasn't so true in the past, how else does the bank make some money off of you? What else besides loans and interest? Collateral is going to be more of a pledge for the loan. So if you have a car loan, your car is actually collateral for the loan, so repo man's going to come and get it and try to make up some of the loan difference. But if you don't, if you run your balance over what's available, what do you get? What does the bank charge you?
Overdraft fees.
Overdraft fee. So overdraft fee, and then if you're a credit card company, it'd be late fees. So that's another area that the bank makes money, especially today. So note, late fees and overdraft fees is another profit center for banks. All right, so so how much do they loan out? Are you saying that if everybody went to go get their deposits, the bank wouldn't have them?
Maybe not right away.
So if they made a house loan that's a 30-year loan, and a car loan that's a 5-year loan, and everybody came for their deposits, would they be able to pay them? No way, right? So they made these longer term obligations with that deposit money, and that's how banks fail. So bank failure can happen. So the key point here is the bank does not have all the deposits for withdrawal if everyone comes at once. So especially in the old days, but we even have a recent example that happened within the last couple of years, this is called a bank run. A bank run, a run on the bank. So rumors start, hey, did you hear old man Hatchett, the owner of the bank, is going bust? He did a real estate development deal that's going down. And they're like, I don't know about you, but I'm going to go pull my money out of Mr. Hatchett's bank. And that rumor starts, and everybody comes to Mr. Hatchett, and he doesn't, of course, have the money. So called a bank run. So rumors start, and everyone runs to the bank to get their money.
Has anything like this happened before?
So how many of you have seen It's a Wonderful Life for Christmas time? Do you remember that scene where they're all coming into the bank? So that's kind of a famous, it's a black and white film, very famous around Christmas time. And so that is an example of a bank run. He's like, I don't have your money. I loaned it to Sally for her house. And I'm trying to do Jimmy Stewart. He's got kind of a crinkly voice, but I don't have your money. I loaned it for his car and whatever. So George, the banker, doesn't have their money. And so if that's the case, then the bank could start to go down. So more recently, we had Silicon Valley Bank, just a couple years ago. They were doing some idiotic stuff, but it still happens today. So I'll put a little extra note here. Silicon Valley Bank. And approximately, I think this was just 2 years ago, roughly let's just call it 2021-ish time frame, might have been 22. Had a bunch of their depositors, or a bunch of loans and stuff out with Silicon Valley types, and they were going down, and they had money that was tied up. And so this is not, it's happened periodically over time. And one of the reasons, this is kind of a long reasons why banks fail, is that the Federal Reserve was serving as the banker's bank. So the Fed serves as the banker's bank. And so we have what's called a fractional reserve system. So if we have, let's put a little picture here of $1 million of deposits. So the bank has $1 million of deposits. We're going to have the banker, so this is private bank, let's call it Kansas State Bank here. So Kansas State Bank. KSB. So Kansas State Bank is going to have a fraction of their reserves held on deposit with the Fed. So they deposit, let's say 10% with the Fed, the banker's bank. So now the Fed over here is holding 10% of 1 million, $100,000. And then they got excess deposits, or excess reserves. So reserves to loan of 90%. And so now they're gonna make $900,000 of loans. Okay, so now if all of these people, like what happened with Silicon Valley, come running for their money, they've only got 100,000 left with the bank. But then all other banks are also doing this same thing. And so the Federal Reserve has lots of money in the billions so that the Fed can tell the depositors, don't worry about it, we got you covered. Right? We're going to cover all of your deposits up to $250,000. So, key point, Fed will stand by, ready to give all depositors their money. And they control the money and they control the rules. Now there's limits to that, and that is up to $250,000 per person. All their money up to, and this has changed over time, but the current level is $250,000 in theory. I'll tell you why I say in theory. Up to $250,000 per person per bank. If we have, I don't know, let's just pick out a number, 300 million people that have bank accounts in the United States. It's probably a little lower than that, but if we have 300 million people with bank accounts in the United States, what percentage of that 300 million do you think have less than 250,000 in their account? Most of them. Probably 90, who knows, 95%, 99%, I don't know what it would be. But that's the whole point, is that we're gonna keep most of the banking system is gonna be fine with that type of thing. So then, if the Fed is credible that they will stand by ready to give all their deposits, then it's less likely that these bank runs are gonna occur. And that's exactly what happened. So we had a big reduction on bank runs. So, decrease in bank runs over time. And credibility builds for the fractional reserve system. Okay, so any questions or comments? Yep.
You said earlier that the Fed did wrong in thinking that they could control more money and do the humanity something good or the population something good. Where did it go wrong?
Basically thinking that circumstances were different, that they could put a bunch of money out into the system and that we wouldn't have inflation. They underestimated some of the things we teach in this class. They forgot about apparently. They're too sophisticated for those. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely true. All right, so let's kind of go through an example of this fractional thing and see what the impact is. So we got a good story for you to visualize here. Example, suppose you find $10,000 buried in a shoebox in your backyard. So you're digging, you went out there to do a little house project. All of a sudden you're like, what the heck is this? You dig it up, you open it up, and there's $10,000 cash in a shoebox. What do you do? Nick? Take it to the Fed, so you're going to turn it over to the authorities? It's good currency. It's still money that's, you can go run to the store with it if you want. Madison?
I feel like I deposited.
Okay, deposit it. But of course you went to the police first, right, to report it? Nobody's going to the police, so let's pretend you went to the police, and then the police, did their thing, held it for 30 days, and nobody claimed it, so it went back to you. So now the story's back to it's legally in your hands with $10,000, and so Madison's going to deposit it. All right, so Madison, where are you going to deposit it? What's your bank?
A BECU.
Huh?
BECU.
BECU. All right, so let's look at deposits. And so Madison is going to make a deposit of $10,000 into BECU Bank. So this is BECU Bank. All right, so if the required reserve ratio is 20%, so let's say that the rule is the required reserve ratio, so the required reserve ratio, so little r, is equal to 0.20, so 20%. If that's the case, how much can BECU Bank loan out? If they're required to keep 20% now with the bank, with the Federal Reserve, and not loan it out, they're required to hold back 20%. How much can they loan out? Tim? $8,000. All right, so let's see. Madison, give me a number between, let's go 5 and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Nadia, what would you do? What would you want to buy if you had $8,000? And nothing boring like save it for the future. I want something fun. $8,000. What are you going to spend $8,000 on? What would you want to do if you had $8,000 and you got to spend it on anything you wanted? What would you buy? Okay, give me some of the bigger stuff. $8,000. I don't want you buying toilet paper and food and something fun. What's Nadia gonna have fun with? $8,000. A what? Okay, phone, laptop. Load yourself up with some electronics. Maybe the 83-inch flat screen, right? That takes up your whole dorm wall or something, right? All right, so Nadia's gonna go buy some electronics, phone, laptop, flat screen TV. And it just so happens she goes to BECU Bank and they're like, oh, no problem, we can loan you $8,000. And so you go to Best Buy, which is an electronics company that's kind of going, I have to explain it now, I used to not have to explain it, but they got all that type of stuff. And so we're gonna have a loan to Nadia of $8,000 for those electronics, and it's gonna go to Best Buy. What does Best Buy do with the $8,000 that Nadia just gave them? Buys new stuff, possibly, but what's the immediate thing they do at the end of the day? At 5 p.m. when they're closing?
Count the money.
Count the money. Where do they go with their money? Back to the bank. So they're gonna go deposit that money in the bank, and so now Best Buy has $8,000 on deposit at Wells Fargo. How much can Wells Fargo loan out? 6,000. So 20% of 8,000, 10% is 800. 800 times 2 is 1,600. So we got 6,400. So $6,400. Let's see, what was your number again? Was it 7?
Yeah.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jesse, what are you buying? $6,400.
First and foremost, I'm gonna upgrade myself and my brother to first class on our flight home.
Okay, so traveling home, first class, maybe some other travel. So let's just stick with travel. So you go to Lawrence Travel Company is who I use for our Guatemala trip. So Jesse calls up Lawrence Travel and books some first class flights and other things. And Lawrence Travel, what do they do with the money once they get it from Jesse? They go deposit it. So now they go and deposit it at Kansas State Bank. Now they go in Kansas State Bank, and now we have another round of lending that's available. And so we've got $1,280 can be loaned out. So each time we've got money that is being loaned out, and I kind of screwed you guys up here a little bit. So let's see, how can I fix this without? Okay, I got it. Your notes might be kind of ugly. This was there, fixed, because I wanted this to be the required reserve ratio is the amount held back. So this is the required reserves of 2,000, giving you 8,000 to loan out, right? So this is called excess reserves. Reserves is money on hand. This can be loaned out. And so this is now this column. Can you guys make that fix on your notes?
No.
Okay. Well, if you can't, you can't. So here was the 1,600, and then this is now 1,280, and we can be done. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Okay, so the point is, I was just kind of mapping you through the logic of what happens in our banking system when we have this idea of banks have to hold back some money and then they can loan it out. Banks have to hold back some money and then they can loan it out. Here's the key point. Does Madison have access to her $10,000 anytime she wants? Yes. Does Best Buy have access to their money at Wells Fargo anytime they want? Yes. Does Lawrence Travel have access to their money anytime they want at K-State Bank? Yes. So here we've had $10,000, but now we've got extra deposits. What has happened to the money supply? What is M1, let's just keep it easy here. So M1 was equal to what from yesterday? Look back in your notes, gotta have this one memorized. M1. Yeah, Simon?
Currency in circulation plus checking account deposits.
All right, currency in circulation plus checking accounts, deposits. Now, technically, was the money in the shoebox currency in circulation? Trick question from yesterday. What did we say about yesterday? Was money that had been buried maybe for 6 years in a shoebox, was that considered by the government's definition currency in circulation? Tim? Yes, why?
Because it is not in the bank's.
It's not in the banking system, yeah, it's not in the bank's vault. So even though it's not circulating the way we think of it moving around, it is outside the banking system, so technically that's considered money in circulation. So, next step in the puzzle here. When Madison took the 10,000 and put it from currency into checking account, did that maneuver change the money supply? Did Madison's decision to take it from currency and deposit it at the bank, did that change the money supply, just that move alone? Let's do a little accounting here. What happened to this side of the ledger? On the currency side, what happened? Did it go up or down when Madison deposited the money? Down. What happened to checking account deposits when Madison deposited the money? Up. Did the money supply change? No, not by that action all by itself. It was a push. So the nation's money supply, as measured by M1, did not change. But ultimately, did the money supply grow? Does Best Buy have access to their money, their 8,000, anytime they want from Wells Fargo? Yes. Does Lawrence Travel have access to their money anytime they want from Kansas State Bank? Yes. So what happened to the money supply? It went up. So the fractional system actually creates money. So what happened here is this is the first level, but then we had 8,000 added on, then we had 6,400 added on, and ... So the first move here with Madison was no change, but it was a change in the composition of the money supply. So Madison composition change. Went from currency to checking account. That didn't change the money supply, but now that the money's being held in the form of deposits, it created more money. So our banking system actually creates money without the government printing off more money, by the way. So that's the key point here. A, the bank doesn't have all your money. That can be kind of a scary thing. And B, the system creates money. So, key point. The fractional reserve system creates money through deposit creation. So we can use the deposit multiplier to estimate the change in the money supply use the deposit multiplier to estimate the change in the money supply from a change in excess reserves. So we have a shortcut formula to estimate what this change is. So, shortcut. Love it. The change in the money supply is equal to 1 over the required reserve ratio times the change in excess reserves. So again, what happened here is Madison created some excess reserves of $8,000. From her change from currency to deposits, excess reserves of $8,000 were created. And so how this formula would work here is 1 over the required reserve ratio, which is 0.20, or 0.2, times the $8,000 1 divided by 0.2 is, anybody got a real calculator on? 5, yeah, so 2/10. So if you pull out your calculator, 1 divided by 0.2 equals 5 times 8,000. And so we get $40,000 of money growth from this change. All right, questions or comments on that calculation? So all we're doing here, by the way, is just adding all of these numbers essentially. 8 plus 6,400 plus this goes down to infinity. And so this nice little shortcut formula, all these numbers add up. If you guys, I don't know if you have something like this on your paper, but basically all of these dots, all of these numbers equals 40,000. Is the change in the money supply. So the shortcut formula gives us the final change of how many deposits were actually created. Okay, yeah?
This felt like a bank run. Can't people not get their money out of the bank all at once anyway? Like, aren't there limits? You can only take like a certain amount of
No, not in theory. If you were gonna get cash, they usually ask you for 24 hours just because they don't carry that much cash on hand. So if you are withdrawing over $10,000, and the federal government has regulations because they're trying to minimize, human trafficking and drugs and monitoring stuff. So any deposit or withdrawal of 10,000 or more gets a special little note by the person behind the counter. Madison came in, she wanted 15,000. She looked a little sketchy. She had sunglasses and white powder around her nose, right? So they're going to make some sort of notation on that transaction And so that might help them with, money laundering and other stuff in theory. So it's, people do sometimes complain that that can be invasive. So, did I answer your question?
Not really.
Okay, say it again.
So wouldn't that mean like the bank runs can't happen if you
Oh.
only get a certain amount at a time?
Yeah, no. So in general, as long as you have them, they'll be there, and the Fed will literally, like with Silicon Valley Bank, they will bring armored trucks full of cash and drive it to the bank to make those deposits good. So that's where the bank is the bank, the Fed is the banker's bank. And so they will make people have enough money if needed. Whoa. Tornado. Okay. Well, fun. Okay. Anything, does that make sense? So you're right in the sense there's limits there, but in theory, if you did it ahead of time anyway, not a panic bank run, but give them the 24-hour notice, they can get you the money. So if you have $160,000 and you want it all in $100 bills, you call it up, give them a little bit of notice because they don't normally keep that much vault cash, but they can get it. They will call the Federal Reserve Bank and say, hey, I know I've got a bunch of loans out, but Madison wants her money and we need a loan. We need a short-term loan. And so the Federal Reserve will supply that cash to them to make it happen. Tim?
There is an end to that bank as well, right?
There's a what?
There is a bank to the Federal Reserve as well.
There's not a bank to the Federal Reserve. So the
Yeah,
Federal
but
Reserve,
it has an end, right? It has a limit. Because if everyone does that,
they can always print off money.
oh, right.
So remember, the bank, that's the luxury they have. They can just make more of this stuff if they needed to. So yes, there would be in theory some limits, but not quite. All right, so sorry, don't pack up yet. I still got a couple minutes and I just want to put an extra notes in here. This multiplier shows the maximum, but this isn't very real here. What would cause this multiplying effect to be less? What would need to happen in my chain of events, my thought experiment I walked you through, that would make these numbers add up to less than 40,000?
Not spending all the money all at once.
Not depositing all of the money, right? And spending, so you want to hold some money as cash. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah, so if you hold some money for cash, and Simon? No, I'm going to hold that constant. We're going to say that stays the same. But you're right, that would cause it to change. Yeah, then we're changing the multiplier. But if people hold cash or if banks don't loan out, so this is kind of an important note here that you need to know for the test. So write it down in your notes. Note, multiplier 1 over R is the maximum change. In reality, we have what's called currency drain. A currency drain is one, people holding some cash. So Madison thinks, well, I'm not going to put all 10,000. I'd like to keep an extra 1,000 handy, right? And if she only deposits 9, then right at the start we're reducing it, right? So, and then anywhere along the way, anybody holding cash. And then number 2 is banks not loaning out the maximum. Banks not loaning out all excess reserves. So if they don't loan it all out and people hold some cash, then this multiplier effect is going to be less. Okay, and that's where we'll wrap today. So.